Seconded to direct staff to bring a communication plan for reconfiguring lanes south of Capitol Drive, includes residents, communication with residents, and interfacing with the DOT, City of Milwaukee, pedestrian bike and safety committee, and other professionals as needed, with the goal of making a decision on the pavement markings to complete the construction project as scheduled in 2018.
Okay. Call the question. All in favor of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Passes 5-2. Okay. Moving on to the next item on the agenda. Community Business Relations, Trustee Rosick, consider parklet policy.
Thank you. I am not, so I did not get to go to the meeting, however, we go to Art and our manager, for giving me what the committee had recommended, and please feel free, Trustee Govic, or like that, any comments to the committee. It looks like the committee was recommending to adopt the proposed parklet policy. This is an motion, just telling you what they're recommending, to modify to adopt the policy with 2 revisions, and those revisions were to modify the existing draft to maintain approval for all parklets from the village board. My understanding is our staff had recommended in their draft of the policy to the committee and board that they would be able to approve on an annual basis, of course, so someone that already has an approved parklet, as long as they still met all the criteria, there was no parking change, there was nothing significant changes, and there was no complaints, but if everything was still compliant, they would be able to renew that application and be approved without having to go back to the board. So the committee had recommended modifying that so that every application would still come back to the board, including most. The second point of change was to include the definition of a block based on address. Based on address utilized. Okay, so instead of doing the intersection blocks by intersection, you actually say 1,000 block. So that you're not relying on the intersection, you're using the actual address on that. Addresses on that block. Did I miss anything? I do have some questions or discussions, so I'm not going to make a motion. Unfortunately, it's not for me, but does anybody have any?
You want me to clarify anything, or I can just give you a brief rundown of what
I think that would be good.
Sure. So obviously this has been discussed for a year, if not more. It was a pilot program in the village of Shorewood, I think for 2 years now. When I came in, it was one of the things that I was asked to try to clarify and get adopted prior to the 2018 season of parklets. The existing draft at January 15th has a goal for receiving applications, so I kind of prioritized this as one of the projects I want to get through. And so the draft I came in working on, I believe the interim manager had drafted on October 17th. There were 12 comments that were laid out for me to make sure they were incorporated. Those were incorporated within the existing draft. Beyond those changes, I also made some minor, editing, content neutral things, grammar, formatting, things like that. And then in my memo for the January 8th meeting, I had presented 9, essential modifications to just swapping things back and forth and moving things. At that time, the 2 items of discussion were, the definition of severe in terms of whether or not anyone would ever be allowed to have a parklet and a side or front patio. As drafted, it says under severe circumstance they'd be allowed. Staff interpretation of that is it would need to come to the board anyways, so it just kind of sets the tone as to what the applicant would need to, prove in terms of, I think this is severe because of that. So there was some discussion about whether or not severe would ever be allowed or not allowed. That was one thing. And then the second one was whether or not staff would be allowed to approve, previously approved parklets. It was my thought, honestly, that if it had gone through, I didn't feel the need to either burden the applicant or village board with reapproval of things that had met the aspects of the program. I'm definitely open to consideration of whether or not that's something that you'd like to do. I just figured if it had gone through and was approved in the past and it complied with the program, there was no need to bring it back. They would simply need to reapply, pay the fee, and get the permit to put it out there. But in committee, that was discussed as to whether or not, village board wanted to see all of them. That's just kind of how left the committee. So, and then adding the definition of block, like Trustee Wozak mentioned, it's just not based on intersections, just so it's more clear as to, when someone comes in, whether up to 10% is allowed. I had made a map of, the parking, striping plan for Oakland north of Capitol, and just identified where they'd be. Based on that, table was provided in the memo that outlines, the blocks based on addresses. So that was just, the committee had asked that be specified within the policy so that moving forward, we know that's in there.
Question for Mark. So since we're now defining it by address, does that affect the Broad House? This camp has a parklet in the 4,000 block and Broad House is asking for, does that affect their eligibility?
So the definition didn't change how it was previously presented in Exhibit B prior to that. What does affect the Broad House particularly is the striping plan. So I think previously Exhibit B had indicated that the Broad House would be eligible based on it wouldn't take up to 10%. However, the striping plan that's been presented, or approved I should say, for implementation, I believe only shows 19 parking spaces within that block, so that block technically on that side is only allowed the one. So technically based on the 10%, that would need to be reconsidered by the board. There is a note within the existing policy that the board may modify that requirement, subject to your review and approval. So that's an instance of where staff could not approve two in that block. We'd have to bring them both, or bring them to you at that point. If it was compliant, staff would have felt more comfortable reapproving, something. But so just to answer the question, the definition of block didn't change that interpretation. What changed my interpretation is the actual counting of the spaces. So somewhere in there, we lost 20 feet or so. It's really close, but that's where we're going.
So they would need, for us to have that second parklet in that block, 4,000 block, they are going to need to come to the board and get approved.
Correct, and they would need approval anyways because they're a first-time applicant, but yeah, they would need to get approval.
But based on, I'm sorry. Yeah, but based on our policy, we can always make an exception, we're good at that. But based on what it says, would we be allowed, would we be, so what does our policy say now? I think you're saying that our policy would recommend not to approve a second one for that block.
Actually, I would interpret it differently. It says within the policy, the village board may revise the number of parklets per block. Each parklet shall be evaluated on its individual merits. The unit criteria established in this policy manual does not alter the board's discretion to accept, reject, or modify any application. So in my interpretation, if you wanted to modify the 4,000, the east side of the 4,000 block to have a second parklet, it would be within.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I said that wrong.
Sorry, okay.
What does the policy guidance say that we can always modify it, but what do we modify? I mean, based on the criteria that are in the policy, what would the criteria say? Is a second, if the Broad House came forward tomorrow, based on the criteria, where would they fall?
So the criteria I think you're referring to is no more than 10% of the available parking spaces on each side of the street block may be occupied by parklets. It's my memories, either 18 or 19. There's 18 or 19 on that side.
Okay.
They would need to have 20 spaces to get two parklets. So you'd be making the exception that it's within reason that 19 is close to 20, or the size of it perhaps is.
So the criteria says no, but you always have the discretion to make the exception.
That is my interpretation of how the policy would be worked.
There's another issue there, that we have an ineligible location is specified as one that's within 6 feet of the stormwater limit. And that's a bigger issue, I think, there than the 10%.
Correct. They would need to have they couldn't have a large parklet because they have a storm inlet indirectly in front of their door. So they're, even if they were to apply for it, it would be limited.
I have a few just questions that I had from the prior meeting that we had to get deferred from in the committee. one of the suggestions in the prior committee that I had made was to just make any new parklets ineligible in the block that's closest to Capitol intersection. That, I don't think that made it to the full board, but my questions are, there's an ADA, a business, when we did get business feedback from the program, the ones that are participating a while ago, before you were here, one of the things that it says in section 5L talks about ADA compliance, and the operator said for ADA compliance, the sidewalk tables are necessary. So the parklet might not be ADA accessible, but in combination with the side, like the whole thing is ADA accessible because they have the tables there. So there's equal opportunity. It was a really tight squeeze, and so if you had to just have the parklet as ADA accessible, regardless of your equal opportunity in the sidewalk tables, then they would have, it wouldn't have been financially beneficial because the tables would have been limited to the point that it wouldn't have been very beneficial. So, but in combination with the outdoor tables, it became ADA compliant, and then you were allowed to have 4 tables rather than 2. So I'm just asking, is that something we should modify, or just at least acknowledge that if someone comes in with a design and in combination with the outdoor seatings, it's all outdoor seating, it's ADA compliant, will we make them modify the tables so that you can actually get around on the parklet?
I mean, a lot of these are contextual based, you know, as to, you know, where other furniture is placed, so I definitely see your point in making sure that it's feasible and not, you know, removing the value of having the extra space. I don't know the specifics, I'll be honest, of, you know, where this particular clause came from, and I hadn't been brought up to my knowledge previously, but I'd have to talk about building inspectors, you know, to see whether or not this language needs to be modified.
No, it's just how it, I don't need to make an amendment or
Okay.
anything. I just wanted you to know that the businesses had made the point that you can look at ADA compliance as just the parklet or as in conjunction with the tables. So that's just something they wanted me to pass along. In the 6th area for the application, it says show the building line, blah, blah, blah. Kim, is there value in adding in the property line? We just had another, it wasn't a parklet, but it was, doesn't matter about the building line. We had a problem with overlaying building line and the property line for a different issue, and I just wondered if it was valuable to put that in there.
Where are you in the document?
It's under section C, application. It talks about what you need to submit. You need to show the building
What
line.
Roman numeral are you
Page
on?
4?
It says 6, I'm sorry, I didn't mark this.
I think it's section 6, page 3, it says site plan showing the parklet, public sidewalk, and building line, progressing from property line perhaps to be, is that the right area?
I just didn't know if that would be valuable.
I don't see what we're talking about, I'm sorry.
On page 3.
Page 47 of the packet, which is page 3 of the
On
policy.
page 3 of the policy, Roman numeral 5, 6 is in there, application approval process.
Oh,
Correct, A, B.
Site plan showing parklet, public sidewalk, and building line with all dimensions to scale. Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
So anyways, if you feel that's important, we could add that in. And then my more significant question is, it says that, my version says North Shore Lingerie and Colectivo are both eligible candidates.
You're not, that's not the version.
Okay.
That's the old version.
Okay, so they're not. And is there,
There's a bus stop there.
So we had removed that exhibit just based on it being too specific and not being based on the actual parking counts that I had looked at since last meeting. So I would just, you know, relook at those specifically again.
but they're not based on parking, that's why I had the question. When I said
Based on bus stop.
No. The recommendation when it did say eligible was that they could, the North Shore Lottery could, if on the side, And I thought we had agreed in committee that there's not going to be any parklets on residential streets, just on Oakland. So I just want to make sure that wasn't listed as eligible based on, okay, thank you. And then Collectivo, the issue was if you have a patio, and I guess that gets to Stone Creek too, because it's permanent fixtures now in the right of way rather than just outdoor tables. How does that influence a decision?
So once again, that's the severe question. So since they have patios, you have to determine whether or not there's other severe space limitations that require them, consideration of additional
Okay, so
seating.
you can consider that patios. Okay. I think that was it. Thank you very much.
Are we moving to a motion? here?
Oh, I can do that. So, let me see if I can get it right. I move to adopt the proposed parklet policy, subject to modifying the existing draft to maintain approval for all parklets from the village board, and including the definition of block based on address utilized to determine the eligibility of calculations. I have it in writing if you need this.
Second.
Thank you. Go ahead.